The jukebox crackled, spitting out a scratchy rendition of Fleetwood Mac's Dreams. As the diner's neon sign flickered against the dawn, Ellie Harper, 28, leaned against the counter, her barista apron stained with espresso and her hazel eyes tracing the grain of the wood. She sighed, the kind of sigh that carried the weight of a long shift and a longer life. The scent of burnt coffee and maple syrup hung in the air, mingling with the salty breeze from the Pacific just a block away. She didn't see Riley Kane walk in at first. The bell above the door jingled, but Ellie was too busy wiping down the counter, muttering about the guy who'd tipped her a single dime. Then a shadow fell across the counter, and she looked up. Riley, 32, stood there, her camera dangling from her neck like an extension of her body. Her dark hair was pulled back, but a few strands escaped, framing her sharp jawline. She had the kind of presence that made the room feel smaller, like the air itself was holding its breath. "Black coffee, no sugar," Riley said, her voice low, almost a challenge. Her eyes, deep and unreadable, locked onto Ellie's for a split second before flicking away. Ellie smirked, pouring the coffee with a practiced hand. "You're new around here, huh? Or just passing through?" Riley's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "Depends on what I find worth staying for." That was the hook. That one line, delivered with a casual edge, snagged something in Ellie's chest. She didn't know it then, but it was the moment her world tilted. Riley Kane wasn't just another customer. She was the storm Ellie didn't see coming. Ellie's life in Seaside, California, was small, predictable. She'd grown up here, in a town where everyone knew your name and your secrets. Her mom had left when she was 10, her dad was a fisherman who smelled of brine and regret, and Ellie had learned early to keep her head down. Being a lesbian in a place like this wasn't easy. She dated a few girls in high school, stolen kisses behind the bleachers, but nothing stuck. Love, she figured, was for people with bigger lives than hers. Riley, though, was different. She wasn't just passing through for a weekend shoot. She'd rented a tiny studio above the bookstore, her camera always in hand, capturing the town's quiet beauty. Rusted boats, weathered faces, the way the fog clung to the cliffs at dawn. Ellie saw her everywhere. At the pier, snapping shots of the sunrise. At the market, squinting at tomatoes like they held some cosmic secret. And every morning, without fail, Riley came to the diner for her black coffee, no sugar. Their conversation started small. Ellie would tease Riley about her fancy city ways. Riley was from San Francisco, a fact she wore like a badge. Riley would fire back, calling Ellie small-town royalty, with a grin that made Ellie's stomach flip. They'd talk about music, movies, the way the ocean sounded different at night. Ellie noticed the little things. The way Riley's fingers lingered on the coffee mug. The faint scar above her eyebrow. The way her laugh sounded like gravel and honey. One morning, Riley lingered longer than usual. The diner was empty, the breakfast rush gone. Ellie was sweeping, the broom scraping against the linoleum. Riley leaned against the counter, her camera resting beside her. "You ever think about leaving this place?" she asked. Ellie paused, the broom still in her hands. "All the time. But where'd I go? This is all I know." Riley's eyes softened just for a moment. "You'd figure it out. You've got fire in you, Ellie. I see it." Ellie's throat tightened. Nobody had ever said anything like that to her. Not her dad, not her exes, not even herself. She wanted to say something back, something clever, but all she managed was, "You don't know me." Riley's gaze didn't waver. "Maybe I want to." That night Ellie couldn't sleep. She lay in her tiny apartment above the diner, the hum of the fridge mixing with the distant crash of waves. Riley's words echoed in her head, and for the first time in years, she felt something dangerous, hope. The conflict came fast. Riley wasn't just a free spirit with a camera. She was guarded, her walls built high and reinforced with steel. One evening they walked the boardwalk together. The sky bruised purple, the air thick with the scent of seaweed. Ellie, emboldened by a cheap beer, reached for Riley's hand. Riley pulled away, her face tightening. "Don't," Riley said, her voice sharp but brittle. I don't do that. Ellie's heart sank, but she played it off with a laugh. What, hold hands? Didn't peg you for a prude. Riley didn't smile. I don't do feelings, Ellie. That's my rule. You want to hang out, fine. But don't fall for me. I'm not staying. The words hit like a slap. Ellie wanted to argue, to ask why, but the look in Riley's eyes, fear maybe or pain, stopped her. She nodded, swallowing the ache in her chest. Fine. No feelings. Just coffee and boardwalks. But it wasn't fine. Ellie was already falling, and Riley's rule was a line in the sand she couldn't help but cross. The next morning, Ellie's hand shook as she poured Riley's coffee. The diner was alive with the clatter of plates and the murmur of locals, but all she could hear was Riley's voice from the night before. Don't fall for me. The words clung to her like damp clothes, heavy and cold. She slid the mug across the counter, avoiding Riley's eyes. You okay? Riley asked, her voice softer than usual. She leaned forward, her camera absent for once, her fingers drumming lightly on the counter. Ellie forced a smile, the kind that didn't reach her eyes. Peachy. Just another day in paradise. Riley didn't push, but she stayed longer, sipping her coffee slowly, her gaze flickering to Ellie between sips. It was infuriating how Riley could act like nothing had happened, like she hadn't drawn a line Ellie was already tripping over. But there was something else in Riley's eyes, a flicker of guilt maybe, or something deeper she wouldn't name. Over the next few weeks they fell into a rhythm, a fragile dance of closeness and distance. Riley would show up at the diner, sometimes with her camera, sometimes with the book she borrowed from the bookstore downstairs. They'd talk about everything and nothing. Ellie's dream of opening her own coffee shop, Riley's love for capturing fleeting moments in her photos. Ellie learned that Riley had grown up in foster care, bouncing between homes in San Francisco, never staying long enough to belong. It explained the walls, the rule, the way Riley seemed to carry her whole life in that camera bag. One afternoon, Riley invited Ellie to a photo shoot at the cliffs. The sun was high, the sky a relentless blue, and the wind carried the sharp tang of salt. Ellie watched as Riley framed shots of the jagged rocks, her movements precise, almost reverent. You make it look easy, Ellie said, sitting on a boulder, her sneakers scuffing the dirt. Riley glanced over, her lips curving. It's not about easy. It's about seeing what's there, not what you want to see. Ellie's chest tightened. She wanted to ask if that's how Riley saw her, just what was there, nothing more. But she didn't. Instead, she picked up a pebble and tossed it toward the waves, watching it disappear into the foam. That evening, Riley showed Ellie some of her photos on the camera's tiny screen. There was one of Ellie laughing, her hair a mess from the wind, her eyes bright against the backdrop of the sea. You took this? Ellie asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Riley nodded, her shoulder brushing Ellie's. You're photogenic when you're not trying. Ellie's heart raced. She wanted to lean into Riley to close the gap, but the rule loomed like a shadow. Instead, she said, You're not so bad yourself, Kane. Riley laughed, a real laugh, and for a moment the walls seemed thinner. But the tension grew. Ellie couldn't help it. She noticed everything about Riley. The way her hands moved when she talked, the faint freckles across her nose, the way her voice softened when she spoke about her favorite photos. Every moment with Riley felt like a Polaroid, developing, vivid and fleeting. Ellie tried to keep things light, to honor Riley's rule, but her feelings were a tide pulling her under. One night they ended up at a dive bar on the edge of town. The air smelled of stale beer and cigarette smoke, and a local band was butchering a Springsteen cover. Riley was on her third whiskey, her guard slipping. She leaned close, her breath warm against Ellie's ear. You ever feel like you're running out of time? She asked. Ellie's pulse quickened. All the time. Like I'm stuck in this town, waiting for something to happen. Riley's eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment, Ellie thought she might kiss her. But then Riley pulled back, her expression clouding. Don't wait for me, Ellie. I'm not your something. The words stung, sharper than the boardwalk rejection. Ellie stood, her chair scraping against the floor. "Then why do you keep coming back?" she snapped, her voice breaking. "Why do you keep looking at me like that?" Riley didn't answer. She just stared at her glass, her jaw tight, and Ellie walked out, the night air cold against her burning cheeks. Ellie didn't sleep that night. She sat on her apartment's tiny balcony, the ocean's roar a distant hum, her mind replaying Riley's words. "I'm not your something." It felt like a door slamming shut, but Ellie couldn't stop wondering what was on the other side. She lit a cigarette, a habit she'd mostly kicked, and watched the smoke curl into the starless sky. The air smelled of salt and regret, and her chest ached with a longing she couldn't name. At the diner the next morning, Riley didn't show. Ellie poured coffee for the regulars, her movements mechanical, her eyes darting to the door every time the bell jingled. By noon she was a mess of nerves, her hands trembling as she refilled sugar jars. She told herself it was fine. Riley was just a customer, just a fling that never was. But the lie tasted bitter. Riley finally appeared that evening, just as Ellie was locking up. The diner's neon sign buzzed, casting a red glow over Riley's face. She looked tired, her camera bag slung over her shoulder, her hands shoved deep in her pockets. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the hum of the street. Ellie wanted to say no to protect herself, but her heart betrayed her. She nodded and they walked to the pier, the boards creaking under their steps. The air was thick with the scent of fish and damp wood, and the waves crashed below, relentless. "I'm sorry about last night," Riley said, stopping to lean against the railing. "I didn't mean to. I don't know, Ellie. I'm not good at this." Ellie crossed her arms, her voice sharp. "At what? Being honest? Or just being a person?" Riley flinched, but she didn't look away. "Both, maybe. I've spent my life moving, never staying long enough to get attached. It's easier that way." "Easier for who?" Ellie shot back. "You think it's easy for me, watching you pull away every time we get close?" Riley's eyes darkened and she took a step closer. "You don't get it. I'm leaving in a month. I got a gig in New York. This," she gestured between them, "can't happen. I told you not to fall for me." Ellie's breath caught, a mix of anger and hurt. "And what if I already have?" The silence that followed was deafening. Riley's face softened, and for a moment, Ellie thought she saw something break in her. But then Riley turned away, staring out at the black water. "Then you're making a mistake," she whispered. The next few days were a blur. Ellie threw herself into work, scrubbing counters until her hands were raw, blasting music to drown out her thoughts. Riley still came to the diner, but their conversations were stilted, polite. Ellie hated it, the distance, the pretense. She wanted to shake Riley, to make her feel the weight of what they could be. One evening, Riley left her camera on the counter by accident. Ellie found it after closing, the screen still on, displaying a photo of her. Ellie sitting on the cliffs, her face lit by the setting sun. The image was raw, unguarded, and it made Ellie's heart twist. She tucked the camera behind the counter, her fingers lingering on the strap. When Riley came back for it, her relief was palpable. "Thank God," she muttered, clutching the camera like a lifeline. "This thing's my whole life." Ellie couldn't hold back. "Is it? Because it feels like you're hiding behind it, Riley. You see everything through that lens, but you won't let anyone see you." Riley froze, her hands tightening around the camera. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Then tell me." Ellie's voice cracked, echoing in the empty diner. "Tell me why you're so scared to let me in." Riley's jaw clenched, and for a moment Ellie thought she'd walk away. But then Riley's shoulders slumped, and she sank onto a stool. "Because everyone I've ever cared about leaves," she said, her voice raw. "And I can't do that again." Riley's confession hung in the air like smoke, fragile and heavy. Ellie stood behind the counter, her hands gripping the edge, her heart pounding so loud she was sure Riley could hear it. The diner was silent except for the faint hum of the fridge and the distant crash of waves. The air smelled of coffee grounds and something sharper. Fear, maybe, or truth. You think I'd leave you? Ellie asked, her voice softer now, almost a plea. Riley, I've been here my whole life. I'm not the one running. Riley's eyes flicked up, and for the first time, Ellie saw her without the armor. Her face was raw, her dark eyes glistening with something she'd never let show before. It's not about you leaving, Riley said. It's about me not being enough to stay for. Ellie's breath hitched. She wanted to reach across the counter, to pull Riley close, but the rules still lingered, a ghost between them. Instead, she said, "You're enough for me." Riley looked away, her fingers tracing the camera strap. You don't know what you're saying. Then show me, Ellie challenged. Let me in just once. The next week was a tentative truce. Riley started opening up little by little. She told Ellie about her childhood. Foster homes, broken promises, the camera she'd stolen from a pawn shop at 16 because it was the only thing that made her feel safe. Ellie shared her own scars, her mom's abandonment, her dad's drinking, the way Seaside felt like a cage some days. They talked late into the night, sitting on the pier or in Ellie's cramped apartment, the air filled with the scent of salt and takeout pizza. One night, Riley brought her laptop to the diner after hours. She showed Ellie a portfolio she was building for the New York gig. A series of photos capturing small-town life, raw and unfiltered. There were shots of fishermen mending nets, kids chasing seagulls, and Ellie, always Ellie, in moments she didn't even know Riley had captured. You're my muse, Riley admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Ellie's cheeks burned. Didn't know I was that interesting. Riley's hand brushed hers, lingering just a second too long. You're more than interesting, Ellie. You're real. The moment stretched, electric and fragile. Ellie wanted to lean in to break the rule, but Riley pulled back, her smile bittersweet. I'm trying, she said. But I'm still leaving. The push and pull was exhausting. Ellie felt like she was chasing a mirage, something she could see but never touch. She started noticing the way Riley's eyes lingered on her, the way her laugh came easier now, but the New York deadline loomed like a storm cloud. Ellie didn't know how to hold on to someone who was already halfway gone. One afternoon they drove to a secluded beach outside town. Riley's old Jeep rattling over the bumpy road. The air was warm, the sky a soft pink, and the sand was cool under Ellie's bare feet. Riley set up her camera, capturing the waves, but Ellie could tell her heart wasn't in it. They sat on a driftwood log, sharing a thermos of coffee, the silence comfortable but heavy. Why New York? Ellie asked finally, her voice barely audible over the surf. Riley sighed, her fingers digging into the sand. It's a chance to be someone, to make something of myself. I can't stay here, Ellie. This town. It's too small for what I want. Ellie's throat tightened. And what about what you need? Riley didn't answer, but her hand found Ellie's, their fingers intertwining. For the first time, Riley didn't pull away. They sat there watching the sun sink into the ocean, the world holding its breath. The beach moment lingered in Ellie's mind like a photograph, vivid and untouchable. Riley's hand in hers, the warmth of her skin, the way the sunset painted her face in gold. It was the closest they'd come to crossing the line. But the next day Riley was distant again, her walls back up, her camera a shield. Ellie felt like she was drowning in the push and pull, her heart bruised from trying to hold on to something that kept slipping away. At the diner, Ellie threw herself into work, but her mind was elsewhere. The regulars noticed, old Mr. Jenkins commented on her sour face, and even her boss Carla asked if she was okay. Ellie brushed it off, but the truth was she wasn't. She was falling for Riley hard and fast, and every moment with her felt like a countdown. One night, Riley showed up at the diner after closing, her eyes red-rimmed, her camera nowhere in sight. Ellie was mopping the floor, the air thick with the scent of bleach and coffee. You look like hell, Ellie said, trying to keep her tone light. Riley didn't smile. She sank onto a stool, her hands trembling. I got the call today. New York wants me there in 2 weeks. Ellie's mop froze mid-swipe, her heart plummeting. 2 weeks? That's soon. Riley nodded, her voice hollow. I didn't think it'd feel like this. Leaving, I mean. Ellie set the mop aside, her hands shaking now too. She wanted to scream to beg Riley to stay, but the words caught in her throat. Instead she said, "What's it feel like?" Riley's eyes met hers, raw and unguarded. Like I'm leaving a piece of myself behind. The air between them crackled, and Ellie couldn't hold back anymore. She crossed the diner in 3 steps, her hands reaching for Riley's face. "Then don't go," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Stay. For me." Riley's breath hitched, and for a moment, Ellie thought she'd won. But then Riley pulled away, her face crumpling. "I can't, Ellie. I've spent my whole life running towards something bigger. If I stop now, what am I?" Ellie's hands fell to her sides, her chest aching. "You're enough," she said, her voice barely audible. "You've always been enough." Riley stood, her movements jerky like she was fighting herself. "I'm sorry," she whispered, and then she was gone, the bell jingling behind her. The next few days were torture. Riley stopped coming to the diner, and Ellie felt her absence like a missing limb. She threw herself into routine. Pouring coffee, wiping counters, forcing smiles, but the world felt gray. She kept Riley's camera photo of her on her phone, the one from the cliffs, and looked at it when no one was watching. It was proof that something real had happened, even if it was slipping away. One evening, Ellie's dad showed up at the diner, his breath sour with whiskey. "You look like you lost your best friend," he slurred, slumping into a booth. Ellie didn't answer. She poured him coffee, her hand steady despite the storm inside her. "Maybe I did," she said finally, her voice low. Her dad squinted at her, his face weathered like the cliffs. "Love's a bitch, kid. But it's the only thing worth chasing." Ellie laughed, a bitter sound. "Even when it's running away from you?" He shrugged, sipping his coffee. "Especially then." That night, Ellie made a decision. She couldn't let Riley leave without a fight. She didn't know what she'd say, but she knew she had to try. Ellie stood outside Riley's studio, her heart hammering against her ribs. The night air was cool, smelling of rain and ocean, and the streetlights cast long shadows on the pavement. She clutched Riley's camera, which she'd brought as an excuse, though the real reason was burning in her chest. She knocked, the sound sharp in the quiet night. Riley opened the door, her hair loose, her eyes wide with surprise. She was in a faded t-shirt, her packing boxes scattered behind her. "Ellie? What are you doing here?" Ellie held up the camera, her voice unsteady. "You left this at the diner. Thought you might need it." Riley took it, her fingers brushing Ellie's, sending a jolt through her. "Thanks," she said, but her voice was guarded, like she knew this wasn't just about the camera. Ellie took a deep breath, the words spilling out before she could stop them. "Don't go to New York. I know it's selfish, but I can't let you leave without saying it. I'm in love with you, Riley. I don't care about your rule. I don't care if it's a mistake. I just need you to know." Riley's face crumpled, and for a moment Ellie thought she'd break. But then Riley stepped back, her hands gripping the camera like a lifeline. "Ellie, don't do this. You know I can't stay." "Why not?" Ellie's voice rose, raw and desperate. "Why can't you choose me? Choose us." Riley's eyes glistened, and she shook her head. "Because I'm scared, okay? I've never had something worth losing. And you're too much, Ellie. You're everything." The words hit like a wave, knocking the air from Ellie's lungs. She stepped closer, her voice soft but fierce. "Then let me be your everything. Let me be your reason to stay." Riley's breath hitched, and for a moment they stood there, inches apart, the world shrinking to the space between them. Then Riley's hands were on Ellie's face, pulling her in, and their lips met in a kiss that was all heat and hunger and fear. It was messy, desperate, tasting of salt and longing, and Ellie felt her heart crack open. They stumbled into the studio, the door slamming shut behind them. The kiss deepened, Riley's hands tangling in Ellie's hair, Ellie's fingers digging into Riley's waist. The air smelled of cardboard and Riley's shampoo, and the world felt alive, electric. But when they finally pulled apart, gasping, Riley's eyes were wet. "I can't promise you anything," Riley whispered, her voice breaking, "but I want to try." The next week was a whirlwind. Riley canceled her flight to New York, telling the gallery she needed more time. She and Ellie spent every moment together, stealing kisses in the diner's back room, walking the boardwalk at dawn, laughing over cheap wine in Ellie's apartment. It wasn't perfect. Riley was still guarded, still scared, but she was trying, and that was enough for Ellie. One night they lay on a blanket on the beach, the stars bright above them, the waves a steady rhythm. Riley's head rested on Ellie's shoulder, her camera forgotten for once. "I've never stayed for anyone before," Riley admitted, her voice soft. "It's terrifying." Ellie laced their fingers together, her heart full. "Good. That means it's real." But the New York offer still hung over them, a shadow neither could ignore. Ellie knew Riley's dreams were bigger than Seaside, and she didn't know how to compete with that. Riley's decision to stay felt like a victory, but it was fragile, like a sandcastle waiting for the tide. Ellie could see it in the way Riley's eyes darted to her phone, checking emails from the New York gallery, or the way her fingers twitched toward her camera when she was nervous. They were happy, happier than Ellie had ever been, but the question of the future loomed, unspoken but heavy. They spent their days weaving their lives together. Riley started helping at the diner, snapping photos of the regulars for a project she called Faces of Seaside. Ellie loved watching her work, the way her eyes lit up when she found the perfect shot. They closed the diner together, dancing to the jukebox in the empty space, the air thick with the scent of coffee and possibility. But the cracks were there. One night Ellie found Riley sitting on the pier, her camera in her lap, her face distant. "They're pressuring me," Riley said, her voice low. "The gallery. They want an answer by next week." Ellie's stomach dropped. She sat beside Riley, the boards cool beneath her, the ocean's roar filling the silence. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her. Riley's hands tightened around her camera. "I want to be someone, Ellie. I want my work to matter. But I also want this you-us. I don't know how to have both." Ellie's throat burned, but she forced a smile. "You don't have to choose right now. We'll figure it out." But Riley's eyes were haunted, and Ellie knew the choice was coming, whether they were ready or not. The tension built like a storm. Riley grew quieter, her smiles rarer. Ellie tried to keep things light, but her own fears crept in. What if Riley left? What if she stayed but resented Ellie for it? The questions gnawed at her, keeping her up at night, the hum of her fridge a mocking lullaby. One evening they went to the cliffs, the place where Riley had first photographed Ellie. The sky was a blaze of orange and pink, the air sharp with salt. Riley set up her camera, but her movements were slow, distracted. Ellie watched, her heart heavy. "Take a picture of us," Ellie said suddenly, needing to anchor them in this moment. Riley hesitated, then nodded. She set the camera on a tripod, the timer ticking. They stood close, Ellie's arm around Riley's waist, Riley's head resting against hers. The shutter clicked, capturing them against the fading light, and Ellie felt a surge of hope. But later, back at Riley's studio, the truth spilled out. Riley sat on the floor, surrounded by her photos, her voice shaking. "They offered me a solo show," she said. "In New York. It's everything I've worked for." Ellie's heart sank, but she kept her voice steady. "That's amazing, Riley. You deserve it." Riley's eyes searched hers, desperate. "But what about us? I don't want to lose you." Ellie took Riley's hands, her own trembling. "Then don't. Take the show but come back. Or I'll go with you. We can make it work." Riley's face crumpled, and she pulled Ellie into a fierce hug, her tears hot against Ellie's neck. "I'm so scared," she whispered. "I've never loved anyone like this." The word love hung in the air, a lifeline. Ellie held her tighter, her own tears falling. "Then we'll figure it out together." The decision wasn't easy, but it was theirs. Riley accepted the New York show, But she negotiated a compromise, a shorter trip, a promise to return to Seaside after. Ellie, for her part, started planning. She'd always dreamed of leaving, of building something bigger than her small-town life. Maybe New York could be that chance, not just for Riley but for them both. They spent the final days before Riley's trip in a blur of love and planning. They walked the boardwalk, hand in hand, the air thick with the scent of salt and possibility. They laughed over diner coffee, Riley snapping photos of Ellie's goofy faces, Ellie stealing kisses when no one was looking. The rule was gone, replaced by something stronger: trust. The night before Riley's flight, they lay in Ellie's apartment, the windows open to let in the ocean breeze. The room smelled of lavender and Riley's perfume, and the jukebox downstairs played softly, a faint echo of dreams. Riley traced circles on Ellie's arm, her voice soft. "I'm coming back, you know. For you." Ellie smiled, her heart full. "I know. And I'll be here. Or maybe I'll meet you in New York. I'm not letting you go that easy." Riley laughed, the sound warm and real. "You're impossible. And you love me for it," Ellie teased, kissing her softly. Riley's show was a success. Her photos, gritty, raw, full of life, captured the attention of critics and collectors alike. She sent Ellie pictures from the gallery, including one of the photo of them on the cliffs, framed and hung as the centerpiece. "This one's my favorite," Riley texted. "Because it's us." Ellie, back in Seaside, started saving for a trip to New York. She enrolled in online business courses, dreaming of her coffee shop, maybe one with a corner for Riley's photos. The diner felt different now, not a cage but a starting point. Her dad noticed the change, his gruff voice softening when he said, "You're gonna be okay, kid." When Riley returned, the reunion was everything Ellie had hoped for. They met at the pier, the sun setting in a blaze of color, the air alive with the scent of salt and home. Riley dropped her bag and ran to Ellie, their embrace fierce and unapologetic. "I missed you," Riley whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I missed you too," Ellie said, her tears mixing with Riley's. "But we're here now." They stood there, wrapped in each other, the waves crashing below, the world stretching out before them. Riley's rule had been broken not by force but by love, messy, real, and worth every risk. They didn't have all the answers, but they had each other, and that was enough. The future was uncertain, but it was theirs to shape. Ellie and Riley started planning a life together, one that balanced Riley's art and Ellie's dreams. They'd face challenges, distance, doubt, the pull of different worlds, but they'd face them together. Seaside, once a cage, became a home, a place where love had broken all the rules and built something new. And every morning, Riley still came to the diner for her black coffee, no sugar. But now she stayed for Ellie, and that made all the difference.